The mysterious invitation. John Miller was not the kind of man who believed in strange stories from the news. He worked in a small workshop near the city spaceport, fixing shuttle engines and repairing old spacecraft for traders. Most of his days were quiet, filled with the smell of metal and the hum of machines. He liked it that way. Life on Earth was simple, and John liked simple. But one evening, something happened that would change his life forever. It was just after sunset when John returned to his small apartment. He had a bag of groceries in one hand and a tired look on his face. The hallway was dim, the old lights buzzing faintly. He walked to his mailbox expecting bills, advertisements, or nothing at all. Instead, he found a single envelope that seemed to glow faintly. It was warm to the touch, as if it had been sitting under the sun. The paper felt smooth like glass, yet it bent like silk between his fingers. In the center was his name, John Miller, written in shining gold letters. Underneath, there was a second line in strange symbols he had never seen before. John froze for a moment, looking around the hallway. No one was there. The air felt heavy, almost electric, as if the walls were listening. He carried the envelope inside and set it on his small table. The glow from the envelope lit the room with a soft golden light. He took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a single card, thick and smooth like polished stone. On one side, there was English writing. On the other, more of that alien script. The English side read, "You are cordially invited to a wedding on the planet Varelia. Your presence is requested as an honored guest. Transportation will arrive for you at midnight local time." There was no date, no return address, no signature. John turned the card over, trying to make sense of the alien symbols. They seemed to move slightly like water rippling. He blinked and thought he saw shapes inside the letters. Stars, moons, tiny planets drifting. He laughed nervously to himself. "This is some kind of prank," he muttered, but deep down he wasn't sure. The card felt real, and so did the strange pulling feeling in his chest. It was like something inside him was whispering that he needed to go. He put the card down and paced the room. A wedding on another planet. That was impossible, wasn't it? He had heard rumors at the spaceport, stories of humans invited to strange alien gatherings never to return. He had always ignored them, thinking they were made-up tales to scare new pilots. But now he was holding proof in his hands. Or maybe, bait. The words "honored guest" played over and over in his head. Why him? He wasn't rich, famous, or powerful. He was just a mechanic. Nobody important. The sky outside darkened. John tried to distract himself with dinner, but he couldn't eat. His eyes kept drifting back to the glowing card on the table. He wondered what Varelia looked like. The name alone sounded like something out of an old sci-fi novel. He imagined vast alien cities, strange creatures, and stars brighter than Earth's skies could hold. At exactly 11:30, the card began to hum softly. The sound was low, like a heartbeat underwater. John felt his own heart match its rhythm. He stood by the window, staring into the night. The streets below were empty. The air was still, almost too still. And then he saw it. A small craft, no bigger than a car, silently descended from the sky. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal. There were no engines, no lights, just a soft glow that seemed to come from within. It hovered outside his window. John stepped back, his breath quick and shallow. The side of the craft opened without a sound, revealing a narrow ramp. Inside, there was a tall figure in silver armor. Its face was hidden behind a smooth helmet. The figure did not speak, only raised one hand and pointed at him. It was an invitation, or maybe a command. John's instincts told him to run, but the strange pull in his chest grew stronger. His mind felt clouded, yet his feet began to move toward the door. He picked up the glowing card, feeling its warmth steady his shaking hands. Part of him wanted to know the truth. Part of him feared he already did. When he reached the craft, the armored figure stepped aside, letting him enter. The inside was larger than it looked from outside, filled with soft golden light. A faint, sweet scent floated in the air. The ramp closed, sealing him in. Without a single sound, the craft lifted into the night sky. John looked out of a small window as the city lights shrank below him. Clouds passed quickly. Then stars filled the view. He pressed his hand against the glass, feeling the cold of space on the other side. The card in his pocket still glowed, as if alive. And somewhere deep inside, John felt that whatever waited for him on Varelia was not just a wedding, the journey to the unknown. The craft moved like a dream through the darkness of space. John sat in a smooth black seat that felt warm, almost alive. There were no buttons, no controls, no visible pilot seat. Only the tall figure in silver armor stood near the front, unmoving. The air inside was calm, but John could feel a deep vibration beneath his feet. It was as if his ship itself had a heartbeat. He tried to speak. "Where are we going?" But his voice sounded small. The figure didn't answer. Instead, a soft light bloomed in the air, forming a floating sphere in front of John. Inside the sphere, he saw moving images, stars, planets, and a single glowing path. It was like the universe was showing him a secret map, and the path led far, far away from Earth. John's chest tightened. This was no simple ride. Something inside him whispered that this journey was not about the wedding. It was about him. He pressed his hand to the sphere, and the map zoomed closer. The final destination pulsed with blue and silver light. Virelia. Suddenly, the ship shifted. Stars outside stretched like ribbons of fire. Time felt strange, like it had slowed and sped up at the same time. John's stomach turned, but his eyes stayed locked on the view. He saw massive shapes in the distance, not asteroids. Something bigger, dark, slow-moving forms watching. As the ship passed, one of the shapes turned. It was alive, a creature larger than a city, its eyes glowing like twin suns. It stared at the craft, and John swore he felt it looking into his mind. For a second, he forgot to breathe. The silver-armored figure raised a hand, and a shimmer of energy covered the ship. The giant creature blinked once, then turned away. John felt his skin prickle. Whatever that thing was, it could have swallowed them whole. The journey continued. Planets of every color and size drifted past. Some looked like jewels, others like burning scars in the dark. But then John noticed something strange. Every so often, the ship would pass glowing symbols floating in space. They looked exactly like the symbols on the wedding invitation. It was as if they were following a trail of writing in the stars. He leaned closer to the window. The symbols weren't just floating. They were alls. They shifted, turning into shapes he almost understood. One symbol became a human hand, reaching. Another became an eye, watching. John shivered. Were these symbols guiding them or warning them? The silence inside the craft was heavy. John wanted to ask questions, but something told him it wouldn't matter. The silver-armored figure turned slightly, and though the helmet hid its face, John felt the weight of its gaze. Slowly, the figure pointed to the sphere again. The map had changed. Now the glowing path split into two. One path shone gold, the other bled red light like fire. John opened his mouth to speak, but the ship suddenly dove. A wall of light appeared ahead, shifting like liquid. The ship didn't slow. It pierced through. On the other side, John gasped. He saw a planet unlike anything in human history. Virelia floated in space like a living jewel. Its surface shimmered with crystal mountains, rivers of silver, and forests that glowed green and blue. 3 moons circled above, their light painting the clouds in soft colors. From orbit, John could see massive shapes moving across the land. Not ships, but creatures. Some looked like walking fortresses, others like flying shadows. It was beautiful and dangerous. The craft began its descent. As they entered the atmosphere, the sound of distant music reached John's ears. It was deep, haunting, and filled with strange harmonies that made his chest tighten. The air shimmered around the ship like it was passing through invisible gates. John gripped the seat. Something told him that once he set foot on this planet, nothing in his life would ever be the same. The silver figure finally spoke, its voice deep and metallic. "Your role begins soon," it said. John swallowed hard. "My role?" he asked. But the figure didn't answer. The ship passed over a glowing city made of living trees and glass towers. Crowds of alien beings were already gathering, and in the center a palace of pure crystal waited, as if it had been built just for him. The alien world, Chai-Si. His ship landed with a sound like a deep breath. John stepped out onto a smooth platform made of crystal that seemed to grow out of the ground itself. The air was warm, yet it carried a strange metallic taste. Above him, 3 moons glowed in different colors. Silver, blue, and pale gold, their light bathing the world in a dreamlike glow. He looked around and saw the city. It was unlike anything he had imagined. Tall towers made of living trees twisted together with bridges of glass and strands of glowing vines. Buildings shifted slightly, as if they were alive. The streets were not made of stone but of crystal dust that shimmered with every step. Aliens of every size and shape filled the walkways. Some floated without wings, their skin glowing softly. Others were tall and thin, with silver eyes and clothes that moved like liquid. Creatures walked on 4 legs, 6 legs, and some even seemed made entirely of light. Yet, as strange as they were, every single one of them turned to look at John, not with confusion, but with recognition. He felt a chill run down his back. It was the same look people gave a king or a prisoner on trial. The silver-armored figure led him through the city without a word. As they walked, John noticed strange things. Every few minutes, the buildings would hum softly. When they did, alien symbols appeared in the air for a few seconds before fading. They were the same symbols from his invitation. Why are they everywhere? John whispered to himself. But before he could think, a shadow passed overhead. He looked up to see massive shapes circling the city in the sky. They looked like flying whales made of crystal and smoke. Their deep, echoing calls vibrated in his bones. Somehow he felt they were guarding the city, or maybe guarding him. The streets opened into a vast plaza. In the center stood the palace. It was so large it seemed to touch the clouds. Its walls were made of pure crystal, yet inside it glowed with rivers of golden light. At its highest point was a dome that looked like a giant drop of water about to fall. The closer John got, the heavier the air felt. His legs moved slower, as if the ground itself was trying to hold him back. Crowds gathered on either side of the path. They didn't speak, but their eyes followed his every step. Some bowed their heads, others raised their hands to the sky. A childlike alien with blue skin reached out to touch him. Before her fingers could reach his arm, her guardian pulled her away, whispering something quickly. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like warning. Inside the palace, the walls were alive. The crystal shifted slowly, forming shapes and patterns. Faces appeared in the walls. Alien faces, human faces, faces of creatures John had never seen. Some looked happy, others sad, and a few looked afraid. John's reflection appeared for a moment, then the wall changed it. Now his face was wearing a crown made of light. They reached the great hall. It was filled with music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The floor reflected the sky above, as if they were standing on a piece of the night, and at the far end of the hall, seated on a raised throne, was a figure unlike any other. She was tall, elegant, and her skin shimmered like molten silver. Her eyes were swirling galaxies, shifting colors with every blink. She wore a gown made of light, flowing like a river around her feet. When she looked at John, the music stopped. A faint smile touched her lips. "You have arrived," she said, her voice like wind through glass. John's heart pounded. He didn't know who she was, but deep down he knew. She was the bride. And somehow, the way she looked at him. It felt like she had been waiting for him her whole life. The bride appears. The great hall seemed to hold its breath. Every alien in the room stood perfectly still, as if the smallest movement might shatter the moment. John could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. The silver-armored figure stepped aside, leaving him alone in the center of the shining floor. At the far end, the throne stood empty now. The silver-skinned woman had risen. She walked slowly toward him, her gown of light flowing behind her like a trail of stars. Each step made the crystal floor hum softly. The music had not returned. It was as if even the sound itself was waiting for her to speak. She stopped only a few steps away from John. Up close, her beauty was almost impossible to look at. Her skin was smooth, like polished moonlight, her eyes deep as endless space. They shifted between colors, silver, violet, gold, as if they could not decide what they truly were. And when she looked into John's eyes, it felt like she could see every memory he had ever lived. "You came," she said, her voice soft yet carrying through the entire hall. John opened his mouth to answer, but his throat was dry. He managed only a nod. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I knew you would," she whispered, though it sounded like a promise. Or a trap. The aliens around them began to hum, a deep, vibrating sound that shook the floor. From the walls, the living crystal began to change shape. It formed strange symbols in the air above them, the same ones from the invitation, but now they glowed blood red instead of gold. John didn't know why, but something in that color made his skin crawl. The bride reached out and touched his cheek. Her hand was warm, almost too warm, and John felt a wave of images rush into his mind. He saw a sky filled with burning ships, worlds crumbling into dust, and in the center of it all, her face, untouched by time. It was not just a vision, it was a warning. She stepped back and spoke in a language he did not understand. The crowd answered as one, their voices echoing like thunder. John looked at the silver-armored figure for some clue. The figure, only nodded, as if everything was going according to some ancient plan. Then, from somewhere behind the crowd, a deep bell rang. It sounded like it was coming from beneath the palace, from deep inside the planet itself. With each ring, the lights in the hall flickered. On the third strike, the bride took his hand. Her grip was strong, too strong, and John realized she was not asking, she was claiming. The humming from the crowd grew louder. The red symbols above them began to spin slowly. The air felt heavy, pressing against his skin. John tried to pull his hand free, but the bride's eyes locked onto his, and in that moment he understood something terrifying. This wedding was not about love. It was about power, and he was the final piece they needed. The bride's smile widened slightly. "You will stand beside me," she said, "not as a guest, but as the chosen." The crowd erupted in a single sharp cry. The crystal walls flared with light, sealing the great hall in a cage of gold and red, and John realized there was no way out. The ceremony begins. The hall darkened as if the moons outside had vanished. Golden flames burst to life along the edges of the crystal walls, casting long shadows that moved on their own. The red symbols above John and the bride spun faster, their light pulsing in time with the deep hum of the crowd. Every sound felt heavy, as if the air itself was pressing down on him. The silver-armored figure stepped forward, holding something in both hands. It was a long, thin object, shaped like a staff, made of black crystal that seemed to drink in the light. At the top, a swirling orb floated in place. Inside it, John could see tiny stars, like an entire galaxy trapped inside glass. The figure raised the staff high, and the crowd fell into complete silence. The bride released John's hand, but he did not feel free. The moment she let go, invisible pressure wrapped around his wrists and ankles. He couldn't see chains bow, but his body refused to move. It was as if the palace itself was holding him in place. The silver-armored figure began to speak in a low, ancient voice. John couldn't understand the words, but each one seemed to echo inside his chest. He felt strange warmth in his blood, as if something was waking up inside him. The crowd responded in unison, their voices sharp and loud. It felt less like a wedding and more like a summoning. Two alien attendants glided toward him, their bodies thin and ghost-like. They carried a cloth made of shifting colors, silver, blue, and gold. Without a word, they draped it over John's shoulders. It was warm, almost alive, and for a moment he swore it moved on its own. The warmth quickly turned into a pulse, matching his heartbeat. It was not clothing, it was binding him. The bride stepped closer again, now holding a small silver box in her hands. She opened it, revealing a glowing ring unlike anything John had ever seen. It was made of light, but the light twisted, bending in strange ways that hurt his eyes. When she lifted it, the crowd gasped. Some bowed, others looked afraid. John realized this ring was not just a symbol of marriage, it was a key. The silver-armored figure lowered the staff until the swirling orb hovered between John and the bride. The air began to hum louder, and the red symbols above them turned white, burning so bright John had to squint. The bride looked into his eyes, her voice soft but sharp as glass. "Take it," she said. John's heart pounded. Some part of him screamed that if he accepted the ring, nothing would ever be the same. But before he could move, something happened. The crystal floor beneath them cracked, sending thin lines of light racing outward. The crowd shifted uneasily. From far below, the deep bell rang again. This time, the sound was wrong. It was distorted, angry. The bride's smile faltered for the first time, John didn't know what it meant. But whatever it was not part of the plan, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, something was coming. The truth revealed. The deep, distorted bell kept ringing, each strike shaking the crystal walls like a living heartbeat gone wrong. The white symbols above John began to flicker, turning red again, then black as if something was draining their light. The silver-armored figure gripped the black crystal staff tighter, looking toward the far doors. The crowd whispered in panic, voices rising like wind before a storm. The bride's eyes narrowed, the swirling galaxies inside them spinning faster. "This is too soon," she murmured, almost to herself. John caught the words and felt a cold weight in his chest. Too soon for what? Before he could ask, she turned sharply and spoke in that strange, alien tongue. Her voice was no longer soft. It was sharp, commanding, like a blade cutting the air. The silver-armored figure answered quickly, and John realized something. They weren't just speaking about the ceremony. They were speaking about him. Every time his name was said, the crowd twitched as if the word itself carried power. The bride stepped closer, her voice dropping low so only he could hear. "You were chosen long before you were born," she said. Her hand brushed his cheek again, and another flood of vision slammed into his mind. He saw an image of Earth, not as it was now, but thousands of years ago. He saw tall, silver-skinned beings walking among humans. He saw them mixing their blood with his ancestors, and in those unions, he saw her. She had not aged in all that time. John's breath caught. You've been waiting for me," he whispered. Her smile returned, cold and certain. "You are the last of the line," she said. "Our bond will awaken the covenant gene." He didn't understand the name, but the way she said it made his stomach tighten. "It will bind 2 worlds into one," she continued. "But if you refuse, they will burn." She turned her gaze to the crowd, speaking loudly now. The silver-armored figure lifted the staff high, and the swirling orb inside blazed. A massive projection appeared in the air above them. It showed a vision of Earth, cities burning under alien skies, ships the size of mountains blotting out the sun. John's hands shook. This wasn't a threat, it was a promise. The bride's voice filled the hall. "Only his union with me will save them." The crowd roared in agreement. John's thoughts spun. Was she telling the truth or just using fear to trap him? His chest ached with the weight of the decision. If he agreed, he might save Earth. But at the cost of his freedom, if he refused, millions could die. The bell rang one last time, and the great doors at the far end of the hall slammed open. The wind howled in, carrying a cold that made even the glowing walls dim. From the shadows stepped a tall figure cloaked in black. His voice was deep and thunderous. "The groom does not belong to you," he said. Gasps filled the hall. The bride's smile vanished completely. John's heart pounded. This stranger's eyes were fixed on him, and in them, he saw the same swirling galaxies he had seen in hers, only darker, sharper, the kind of eyes that promised war. The decision. The stranger's voice rolled through the great hall like distant thunder. "The groom does not belong to you," he repeated, his eyes never leaving John's. The wind that followed him swirled through the palace, dimming the golden flames and making the red symbols above shiver like frightened birds. The bride stepped forward, her silver skin glowing brighter as if trying to push the darkness back. "He belongs to the covenant," she said, her tone sharp. "The bloodline is mine." Her gown of light flared, wrapping her in a halo of shifting colors. The crowd behind her roared in approval, stamping their feet in a rhythm that shook the crystal floor. The black-cloaked stranger laughed, low and cold. "You think you own the last of the line," he said, "but you forget. I carry the other half." He pulled back his hood, revealing a face that made John's breath stop. It was human, but not. His skin shimmered faintly like silver dust, and his eyes, those swirling galaxies, were darker, sharper, filled with storms. John's mind raced. Another like her? Or worse, someone more dangerous. The stranger's gaze locked on him, and for a moment, the world around John seemed to vanish. He saw flashes of a different future, one where the earth was not bound to Veralia, but to something else, something unknown. In that vision, he stood beside the stranger, not the bride, and the stars burned in ways that both terrified and thrilled him. The silver-armored figure stepped between them, black crystal staff raised high. "This is forbidden," it said, its voice heavy with warning. But neither the bride nor the stranger moved back. Instead, they began to circle John like predators, deciding who would take the final kill. The bride's voice cut through the air. "John, take my hand now, and Earth will live." The stranger's voice followed, deep and sure. "Come with me, and you will be free, but your world will change forever." John's pulse pounded in his ears. He could feel invisible chains tightening around him, pulling him in two directions. One side was safety, or at least the promise of it. The other was freedom. But at a price he couldn't see yet. The crowd split into two halves, some shouting for the bride, others calling for the stranger. The palace walls groaned as if the building itself was choosing sides. The red and white symbols above spun faster and faster until they blurred into one blinding light. The bride's hand was inches from his, glowing with golden fire. The stranger's hand was outstretched too, wrapped in swirling shadows. John stood frozen, caught between light and dark. His heart screamed for him to choose. The hall shook violently, a crack splitting the crystal floor beneath his feet. Somewhere far above, one of the three moons shattered into dust. John's breath caught. He reached forward, and the scene went black.